very much. So in my presentation, I'm going to show you the species distribution model that I used to, a series of species distribution models that I used to try to estimate the potential ecological niche of domesticated plants, more specifically buckwheat in the past. But what I would like to talk about through this case study is a much broader range of archaeological problems that can be addressed with the use of statistics that I use, which have to do with how to model the probability of certain phenomena occurring across space based on point locations. This has quite a wide range of applications. One of the more popular ones that you may be familiar with is the predictive modeling of archaeological sites. But there are also other ones, and these models are increasingly used in archaeology. So to give you a little bit of the context about the models that I'm using, I'm constructing this model as part of the interdisciplinary project run jointly between University of Cambridge and University of Bristol, called Crops, Pollinators and People, or shorthand PAGPI. The aim of this project is to investigate the domestication of buckwheat and its spread after the domestication. So what we know is that it probably originated somewhere in the southeastern China, although this is currently also being disputed. And what I would like to find out is, when it was domesticated, where were the likely areas where it could have spread given the environmental constraints, and map them to see where we can look for them, or where it could have spread. And the other aim is to also investigate what was the impact of the different environmental variables on its spread, and ultimately see whether also biotic interactions could have had an effect, because buckwheat is one of the few crops that heavily rely on pollination for its dispersal. So to address this problem, I decided to use the species distribution modeling, which is widely used for this purpose in ecology. And species distribution models generally take the series of environmental layers. The ones that I'm using are the environmental reconstructions for mid-Holocene taken from Watch Clim. It uses the information about the location of the species, which can be represented as point locations, so where the species was present and also where the species was absent, or as an abundance. So, for example, we can have a look at how much buckwheat is currently produced in the world. So the two modeling algorithms that I'm trying to explore are the Bayesian approach, and which isn't that widely used, but a lot of people argue that it could be very useful for estimating the species distribution, especially if you have very little data. And the more widely used one is maximum entropy approach. And before I show you the model, I would just like to highlight the differences between these approaches. So the Bayesian model that I'm using specifically is the binomial ICAR model, and it assumes that the likelihood of finding buckwheat in any space or in any raster cell is distributed binomially, so it can have a value of 0 or 1. And it depends on how many times you looked into the place, so how many trials you had. In our case, only one, because if we have the archaeological sites, we check the archaeological sites once. And the probability that the buckwheat actually was at this site. And the probability, to estimate the probability, we use the logit function, which scales it to be between 0 and 1. And the probability is a linear model based on the relationship between buckwheat and the environmental variables. And in this case, the Bayesian model needs both records of buckwheat presence and the records of buckwheat absence. And presences are actually way more straightforward, even though we managed to find only 26 in the Southeast Asia. And these were pollen records, macrofossils, and microfossils. And there are many different approaches to estimate absences if you don't have actual absence data. In this case, I looked at the archaeological sites where you had archaeobotanical investigation and you could find other crops, but not necessarily buckwheat. So this is how the Bayesian approach tries to figure out where buckwheat was distributed in the past. Maximum entropy approach works slightly different, and it actually estimates different things. It doesn't directly estimate the probability. So it assumes that there was a buckwheat distribution in the past that we don't know. We don't know how it looked. But we have a random sample of points from this distribution. And MaxEnt algorithm tries to work back what was the most likely distribution that would have given you this random points. And in order to make the actual model, it uses machine learning to estimate the effect of the environmental variables, using just trying to fit different response scores and see which ones will give you the probability distribution that is most likely. So this is the Bayesian model that I constructed. And this is the probability map, the mean predictions that resulted from this Bayesian model. The empty dots are the ones that are empty sites without buckwheat. The full dots are the sites where buckwheat was found. And the darker the color, the higher the probability according to this model. And these are the so-called counterfactual plots. So they show you what's the effect of every variable on the probability of finding buckwheat, where all the other variables are kept at the value, which is the mean value at the sites where buckwheat was found. And the envelope around it is the 95 confidence interval. So the model is 95% sure that the curve runs somewhere through this area. And as you can see, this model is not really very sure where to find buckwheat, especially if you look at the effects of precipitation. The envelope runs, first it's kind of narrow, but then basically runs very widely from 0 to 1. So what this model actually tells me is not that this is the likely distribution of buckwheat. This is the best it can do, but it's not really sure. So the answer I'm getting here is that the model doesn't really know. So obviously this is not the answer I hoped for. And most models would never give you that answer. You throw the data at it, and it will give you a model. It won't tell you how certain it is that this is the real distribution. And this is why I think it's one of the strengths of Bayesian approach, is that the I don't know answer is still a better answer than the wrong one. So, and this is just to highlight it. This is how you can plot uncertainty. So this is your worst case scenario. Buckwheat cannot be found almost anywhere. This is your best case scenario. So some areas have basically, you should have buckwheat there, which obviously doesn't make sense. You don't grow buckwheat on the top of Himalayas. So alternative approach is MaxEnt, as I told you. It works differently, so it doesn't use the absence data, which I think is the reason why we couldn't get a good estimate with the Bayesian model in this case. We didn't have real absences, and the ones that are used are not a good proxy. So this model makes much more sense. We can see that the high probability of finding buckwheat is in the areas where it was actually found. That's good. These are the curves that represent the estimated effects of different environmental variables. And since MaxEnt uses machine learning to estimate that, I ran it a few times and every time you get slightly different results. So some of these variables get curves that overlap quite a lot, like mean temperature of the driest water. But you can see that even in this case, the estimate of the precipitation, it's not that good, which points out that none of the models are really sure about how the precipitation affects buckwheat, and this is something I would like to further explore later. For example, have a look at whether there's some kind of interaction between precipitation or temperature that can improve the model. But the question is, how reliable are these estimates? Because we don't have uncertainty here in the Bayesian sense. So there are some ways that can be used to look into whether the model is reliable or not. One is to look whether we can try to predict from the past data the current distribution of buckwheat. And these are MaxEnt prediction for the modern times compared against the current distribution of buckwheat. This is data as production in tons. And you can see that it's roughly, it shows similar areas. It's not perfect, but it predicts it quite well. But we cannot be sure. And since MaxEnt doesn't use absences but uses the background data, we need to have the assumption that the data points that we got is random, which I think in archaeology is fairly difficult to get because there may be a range of factors that affected that are not related to environmental variables. So this is the best we can do with MaxEnt and Bayesian model. There's one more approach that I'm trying currently, which is to look at the current distribution of buckwheat, so the production in tons, this data, to fit the Bayesian Poisson model. It works slightly differently than the binomial one, so it doesn't estimate the likelihood of finding buckwheat of the likelihood of 1, but it estimates the amount of buckwheat that you would like to get at a certain place. And as you can see, this model looks much more reliable. These are again the mean probability of distribution. And these are the response curves of various environmental factors together with the envelope. And you can see that they are much more narrower. The model in this case is much more certain that this is how buckwheat responds to an environment. Especially if you compare the mean temperature of the driest quarter, the curve is very similar to the one estimated by MaxEnt with the peak at around 0 and quite a wide range of temperatures that are suitable. And this is something that makes sense ecologically because buckwheat is known to thrive in a quite wide range of temperatures, specifically between about 10 degrees and 30 degrees, but not in the dry spot. The dry spot is just a proxy of how other temperatures are found during the buckwheat growing season. And again, there's quite a lot of certainty about the effect of precipitation, but much less in both other models, MaxEnt and the binomial Bayesian model. So this is again your worst case scenario, your best case scenario. But with MaxEnt, with Poisson Bayesian model, as I said, it doesn't directly estimate probability. So this is just relatively which areas are more suitable and which areas are less suitable. So even if there is an uncertainty about the difference in suitability, you can still identify the areas that would be suitable for growing buckwheat. The thing is that these are obviously the predictions for the modern times, whereas currently I'm working on using this model to predict the past distribution of buckwheat, and this is still the work in progress. So this will be the next step. So in conclusion, between the two models that work, I got the quite consistent estimation of the effect of the mean temperature of the driest quarter. So we can see that this clearly has an effect, and which sort of the probability grows at first as the temperature increases, peaks, and goes down. There's a lot of problems with the estimation of the precipitation. So that leads me to think that I need to think a little bit more about how it can interact with other variables and try to incorporate these interactions into the models. And the future work is to fit the model based on the present distribution to estimate the past distribution of buckwheat. And conclusions in terms of model performance. As the first Bayesian model shown, it is crucial to have the reliable estimate of the absences. Because actually, let me go back here for a second. Because as you can see, it's not sure about the precipitation, and the mean temperature of the driest water also has a quite large envelope at the lowest temperatures. And as you can see on the map, the lowest temperatures are more to the north and in the Himalayas, which are the areas where we neither have presences nor absences. So this approach also points you out of where are the problems with your data. Currently, since we have only reliable presences, MaxEnt seem to give better results. It's more reliable, but on the condition that we have a random sample, which is not a given. And the final conclusion is that, as I have shown, that I think the most important strength of the Bayesian approach is that it kind of makes you cautious against the overconfidence in the model's predictions, because it doesn't give you just one prediction, but also shows you where your model is uncertain about the results.